Hey, welcome back to the Marianne Hickman Show. Listen, I'm so glad you're here. If you're brand new to the show, thanks for tuning in. This podcast is all about getting on stages, growing your business through the power of stages. And of course, we talk about making money on stage all the time, not just through speaker fees, but also through getting clients and customers. Stages are the number one way to grow the credibility in your business. Trust me, when you get in a room full of your people and it's time to enroll in your product, oh my gosh, that is one of the coolest feelings in the world. And today, I have an incredible guest, Michelle McCullough. She's been all over. We've been in each other's lives for quite some time now. Now, she is all over the website for the National Speakers Association. I was like, oh my gosh, Michelle, like this is so cool. I've got a celebrity in my studio today. But today we didn't talk about her NSA. We didn't talk about the climb to fame within there. What we really talked about is Michelle's passion. And this lesson, I had so many take-home messages for me in this interview because it relates to leadership in my family. It relates to leadership in my personal relationship with Richard. It relates to leadership in the teams that I manage, that I did manage. And I share a lot of the vulnerability about where I sucked as a leader before. And I want you to check this out because if you want to be a better leader, well, you want to be a better husband, do you want to be a better wife? Do you want to be a better parent? Do you want to be a better entrepreneur? Do you want to be a better employee? If you want to have more success, it will come from being happy where you are. And the lessons for that are in this episode. So check it out. I will say that speaking in church did let me cut my teeth.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
You know?
And you know what? To that extent, I would say some of them have more experience than the other challenge with that I found that people think they can speak on anything because they do speak on everything.
Oh, yeah. They're given a topic and they're like, oh.
Like, what do you want me to speak on? I'll speak on whatever. And so and I will say that I have fallen into this trap too. I love to speak. If you were to ask me to give a speech on the price of rice in China, it would take me a little bit, but I could do it.
You do some research.
I could do it.
But you could pull it together.
Uh-huh. But what I have found is when I finally found my topic, realized the purpose that I was meant to be here on this earth to do, it became so much easier to show up, not just as a speaker, but as someone who is researching, doing the work, becoming an expert, providing value and strategy around a topic rather than.
Yeah, and I think that's really valuable. When we do hot seat calls in our community every Friday, sometimes I'll throw a table topic out, kind of like Toastmasters does. Sure. And I'm like, speak on this because you just need the reps. Mm-hmm. You got to get the practice in. And to your earlier point of sometimes we get, and I've seen big name speakers get stuck in this rut of delivering the same keynote over and over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. And it's a beautiful keynote and you should have a keynote, but where's the relevance?
Yep.
When does it evolve? Mm-hmm. What do you, like your audience right now, they care about different things or they want different analogies or stories that aren't from 20 years ago. They want to know what happened to you last week. So this training that we get, I call it relevance training, to get relevant with the community. I think that you have to have that as a speaker.
For sure.
And most of the audience is they're public speakers or they're aspiring public speakers. But I love what you said about finding your niche and just running with it. Would you say leadership is your niche or how would you call your niche? Hey, what's up? Marianne Hickman here. Listen, I'm interrupting my own show because I want to give you something. Now, you guys all want to get on more stages. I got a free resource for you of stages that are just clamoring for guests. They need guests on a daily, weekly, sometimes monthly basis. This is my podcast database. Now, what I'm going to do is have you go to mariannehickman.com/database. Once you put in your information there, I'm going to send this to you totally for free. Open up this database. You're going to click through it, find the next podcast that's relevant to your topic, hit the application button, show up on their podcast, get in front of their people, and share your content. Remember, mariannehickman.com/database. Let's get you unlocked.
So I would say that my niche is emotional intelligence in the workplace.
Okay.
And what that does is it translates. And I am on the earth to make the world a happier place. I know that is my responsibility. I know that is my both divine and my internal passion to help make the world a happier place. But what I have found is that most adults and Americans are spending their days at work.
Yeah.
If they can't figure out how to be happy at work, which is a requirement to pay the bills and thrive in this world, then just general happiness doesn't help. And so I found that when I can talk to leaders about the emotional intelligence of their team, or when I can talk to do an all hands call with the entire organization where I can help them see their happiness in the framework of their work, it feels less ethereal is the word that's coming to my mind. I'm not sure that's the right word, but when you talk about happiness, and the research shows that many people feel disconnected from it for whatever reason, even if they are happy, they want to be happier. Like we're always constantly chasing what happiness looks like.
Yeah.
And so when you think about what happiness is and you have to define it on a worldly scale, it's really hard to
It's
nail
hard
it
to
down.
measure.
Right.
How do you
But
measure
if
that?
You can think about how to be happy at work. We cover how to be happy at home because people, as much as they want to, cannot live in emotional silos. Emotional silos do not exist. We might have mental silos, but emotional silos don't happen.
Define silo for us.
So like,
I know what like a wheat silo is.
Sure,
But
people will say, I can be happy at home, but I'm not happy at work, or I can be happy at work, but I'm not happy at home.
so to pretend that they're not connected.
Yes,
Yeah.
correct. And so all the research that we've done asked both ways. People will say that when they're happier at home, they're happier at work, and when they're happier at work, they're happier at home. But we start with work because it's where they spend the most of their time. It's the people that they interact with. They're often at home. You might be happier at home because you like the people that you're with. And hopefully, right? And there are still some conflicts, but there are ways to choose into that, whether it be because you have a relationship commitment or you birthed and parent them or whatever.
In some way you chose them.
Right.
But you didn't choose everybody at work.
Correct. And so you're forced to figure out how to be happy with people who you may not have chosen as friends, wouldn't choose as family. And so it provides you a framework and almost like a role play in real life setting to figure out your own emotional wellness at work. So that's my life's work. And I have found that leadership and culture makes the biggest difference in improving emotional intelligence at work.
So this is fascinating because I think I was on your website this morning when I saw this stat that said 81% of people don't like their jobs.
Yes.
Which is where we spend the better part of our day, you know, if we're working W-2s or even if we own a company. So do you find that here would be my concern. If I were to go into a company and teach what you teach, I'm not the expert, but you are.
Sure.
I would be concerned that I went in and taught this how to be happy thing and then have a massive percentage of the workforce say, oh, I'm not even happy with my job. I should leave. Right? Is there that concern?
I've had CEOs ask me that question and be worried about it.
Yeah.
Because here's the challenge. The challenge is that almost every organization will tell you that their employees are disengaged and not committed. Either they're quiet quitting, or they are just punching a clock, or because of their challenges at home, can't do a lot at work. But as a result, they're not productive. And so for CEOs and leaders, they're looking at this core root that says, how do I make my team more productive? But if I make them happier, will they still want to stay?
Right.
But that's acknowledging that the culture doesn't support the wellness. And so when I say that to leaders, they don't love that, especially C-suite. They are concerned.
It's their fault.
That's their fault. That's their ownership, the place that they need to stay. But my point to them is if you can create a culture where people are happy and valued, they'll want to stay.
So what are the hallmarks? How do you know if your company, if you're listening and you're a CEO, how do I know my company is a place that people want to stay? And obviously I know this because people stay rather than leaving, but what are the hallmarks of a company where people want to stay?
Well, I think hallmark is an interesting question because I think typically the C-suite will look to statistics,
Of course.
which is great. And so I think there are a couple of statistics that you can say, like look at your employee turnover rate. And you can also I am a huge fan of annual engagement surveys.
Like, what does that mean?
So asking questions, reaching out 10 questions that you ask your employees every single year that helps you get a pulse. Now, some people will say employee engagement surveys aren't super effective. People will lie on them because they don't want to keep their jobs. But the best employee engagement surveys are anonymous.
Yeah.
And you encourage them to take them on someone else's machine so that they don't feel like they can track them.
Interesting.
And so there are ways to make the engagement surveys relevant to the organization and help people feel safe in being honest. I also am a big fan of leadership one-on-ones at the minimum of quarterly. And
I did them weekly.
Right? I do them weekly with my team.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get off because I'm gone or whatever. So it's not always that way.
You know,
but regular touch points. 80% of working Americans believe that they would be happier at work if their bosses showed more emotional intelligence in the workplace. And so that's everything from being happier, from being connected to their employees. Gone are the days where bosses can just say this is what needs to be done. People are looking for supportive bosses who aren't just supportive at work, but care about what they're doing outside the office. So it actually requires not just an emotional toll, but a personal toll on a leadership team. So as you're looking for those hallmarks, to me, the hallmark goes beyond statistics and it goes to relationships. Are people feeling connected to their leaders? And are leaders feeling connected to their teams? And if they are, that's when you know that people will stay, because that statistic that you talked about people wanting to leave their work is largely associated with their bosses or team. It's the people that they work with. And so if they can have better connections with the people that they work with, they're more likely to stay. And then the other thing that I will say to answer your other question is, I have had a boss say, you came in and we had 6 people quit. And that we can't have that. That was terrible. That was the worst thing that ever happened. And I asked who left. And in greater conversation, they were just looking at the statistic rather than looking at the people. And what they found was in more than half of those cases, I think it was like 3 or 4 of those people were not performing. They weren't the people who were the right people. I'm a big fan of right people, right seats. And they were not the right people in the right seats. And so in response, I was like, you're welcome.
Right.
They self-selected and recognized they were not the right fit for the organization. And now you, with this new hat on and this new filter, can choose the right people to be in those spots.
You're the lady in the 5 dysfunctions of a team. You read that book?
Yes.
That comes in and be like, okay, people are going to self-eject and you want them to.
Yes, 100%. And it's better than you having to do it.
Yeah,
because then you run into lots of other challenges. If someone can say, this is not the right place for me, honestly, that's a gift. And in the other 3 cases, there were some unique circumstances. Somebody was having a struggle at home and they needed to find a remote work rather than doing that. And the other 2 were kind of outliers, nothing to do with it. And at the end of the day, even if all 6 left because they just decided they wanted to find something else, bless them. Let them go, because then you can find the people who are right for your organization. Anyway, that was a really...
No, I like it. And it's Mel Robbins, let them.
Yeah.
Just let them. I struggled as a mid-level manager at one of my jobs because I wanted this deep connection with all of the people, and I wanted these one-on-ones. And I was kind of on my own with how to figure out how to do this. So I read all of these management books and all of these things, and I was trying to implement things. And then when I struggled the most was when I would get the directive from on high, right? Like, this is the thing, you have to hit the thing. And then I reverted into that same behavior and I lost my connection with my people. And that was really made apparent to me when I left that position, and I don't talk to any of those people anymore. Ideally, I would like to have a relationship with the people I worked with, because we saw milestones together. I watched babies get born. I watched adoptions happen. I watched families get pulled together. I watched divorces happen and families get ripped apart. And every day they would come in. And when I adopted these impersonal behaviors, I lost it. And I have a lot of regrets about how I ran that. We had, over the course of the time I was running that sales floor, we had 200 people come and go.
Right.
And maybe 6 that were there for a majority of the time. But the turnover was crazy. Is that, and I was told it was normal. In a sales floor, that's normal.
On a sales floor, it typically can be. There are so many factors to sales floor success, and we could do a whole podcast on just that. But one of the things that I think that you're speaking to that I think is important is we talk about leaders being more emotionally connected to their teams. The challenge is they are not KPI'd on that. That's not how how their success is driven. And so for them, they are people are expecting their performance to be in sales numbers or in employee turnover rates or in other pieces that when you as a leader are forced to say, okay, well, I have to choose whether I implement this sales structure or if I am going to try to be more emotional, you pick the sales structure because that's where your paycheck is coming from. And that's how people are deciding if you are successful or not.
Right.
But what we're trying to do is we're trying to help leaders figure out how they can do both. And without stretching so far that they are beyond their capacity, but with the understanding that even if it takes a little bit longer to get to the sales structure that you're talking about, when you have people who are connected to you, they want to do what you implement. And some of the sales structure things are tricky. I worked for a sales organization. I was the training manager for a technology sales floor, and we had almost 100 employees, a fair amount of turnover. And my responsibility was to train them both in the soft skills of sales and also in the products, et cetera. And one of the challenges that we had was that a lot of people don't grow up wanting to be salespeople. And
I don't think anyone is like, I'm going to be a salesman when I grow up. They're kind of forced into it.
sure, or it's a job for them.
Right.
Rather than like a passion or a calling, though there are some people who it is a passion or a calling for. And so I think on sales floors and sales leadership teams, my favorite teams to speak to are all about helping you as a leader find what can motivate someone. Because at the end of the day, one of my very first jobs in companies was selling promotional products. I started my first company when I was 19, and I was not passionate about imprinting on pens. But what I was passionate about was what that income did for me as a college student. That made it possible for me not to have to flip burgers, to make money from home, and to choose my own schedule. And so leaders can do the same thing when, even if they feel like there's somebody who's not connected to the end result or the end job, you can have conversations about what this job does for you. And that's when people can start to feel connected on that level. So turnover is possible. At the end of the day, every human is trying to find a place where they feel like they belong. And that belonging comes from so many different levels of job satisfaction. But it doesn't mean that it's not worth continuing to try, whether you feel like you're in a high turnover environment or not.
Do you feel like some of the turnover, and maybe a better way to frame this up, I've thought a lot about this because the entrepreneur does not thrive in a W-2.
Mm-hmm.
There is a breaking point, right? There's a point where that W-2 is necessary for so long, and they're like, I need to be my own boss. And then there's the people that they really thrive in a W-2, and they're winning there, and they're providing for their families there.
Mm-hmm.
And it took me a while to realize this because I am the entrepreneur. I don't thrive in a W-2 for very long.
Sure.
I can for a little bit. Is that something that is addressed in leadership? I mean, how would you tackle that? And can you spot those people? Like, do you tell the bosses this is why they're not thriving because they need to own their own company? Like, when do you encounter that?
Well, I think that's a really nuanced circumstance that I think it would take a lot of experience for a leader to be able to figure that out. In most cases, the organizations that I'm working with, they're dealing with employees that this was their dream job. Like they went to school for it. They came into the organization and they knew that they wanted to. But then what they thought they wanted as an 18, 19, 20, 21-year-old turns out to be different when you're 25, 26, 27. And so you have a bunch of people who thought that engineering or accounting or even sales or something else was their life's work. And then they get into it and they're like, wait a minute, this sucks. Is not really what I wanted. And at the end of the day, every leader, their number one job is to manage expectations.
I love that you said that. Richard is probably like so happy right now because we work on this in our marriage with parenting too.
Yes.
How do you put it? You say
the biggest problems come from uncommunicated, unmet expectations.
Correct. Yeah, 100%. And the challenge with leaders and employees who are not acting, whether because they would be better in entrepreneur environments or because they thought this was going to be their life's work and here it is, it's not, is that sometimes what we think we want and what we actually want are two different things, and we don't know it because we have been programmed in one way, shape, or form to do X, Y, or Z for so long because that's what we thought we wanted. I feel like this generation, more than any other generation, is actually doing the things that they want to be doing.
I would agree.
That they think they want to be doing, right?
At least they're trying it out.
Right? Different than even 20 years ago when you still had parents who were like, you should be a doctor, or you should be an attorney, or you should have a respecting desk job, I feel like more and more as a culture, we've done better at saying, do what you want. But I also feel like people are like, well, what do I want?
And people don't know.
They see somebody on TV or they meet a friend that affects them and they're like, oh, I would really love to do that. And as they get down the path, it changes. And I think that's the real trick for each of us is as our expectations change, figuring out how we manage that and how do we speak up for what we need. And as leaders, how do you say to somebody, hey, what would make this better? How can we help you thrive here? What would that look like? And championing people, not forcing them to stay where they thought they wanted to be and helping them see others. And one of the best compliments that organizations are receiving by employees, whether through employee engagement studies or something else, is they recognized I needed a change and they helped me find it in the organization. Somebody who was a copywriter and then thought, actually, I really want to be in sales.
Yeah.
And help them make a total different jump and trusted to keep them in the organization to find the places where they were. And so
that's like cross training. You're just getting like bonus employees at that point, right?
Dynamic leadership is tricky, but it is worth it as you invest. And like I said, to me, it's not just a leadership decision. It's a culture that you have to put into the organization.
Yeah, you have to cultivate that and let them know it's okay to ask.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was leading that sales floor, I started pulling data. I like what Alex Hormozi says, but that you can take a soft skill like happiness and you can make several hard skills that lead to that in one way or another. I started this crazy thing where I put together a spiff satisfaction survey, right? So every week we would have these spiffs, or every quarter we'd have bigger spiffs or whatever. And I would have the team rate which ones they liked and how they liked to be recognized. So which spiffs did you like to earn, and what were the activities that you liked doing that got you those things? And obviously we have to keep it semi-revenue based, but I was in sales, so it was pretty easy because commission, we like to make money. That's fun. So this one thing that surprised me the most was the thing that they wanted to earn was time. They wanted time with a mentor. They wanted time with me as their boss. They wanted time off with their families. It wasn't the AirPods. It wasn't the pizza party. It wasn't the pizza party was in a long way. It was crazy what people do for a slice of pizza. But the number one thing they wanted was actually time with their mentor, with the head of the company. And I was blown away by that. And it really was revelatory to me on what they valued. It was that personal investment. It was becoming a better person. It was becoming a happier version of themselves. Right?
Correct.
Blew me away. Do you do the same thing, or do your managers?
Yes.
What do your managers do?
We asked about that in the research too. What is it that would help you feel happier at work?
Yeah.
Mentoring was on the list. Executive coaching was on the list. Other traits that I was curious about. They care about team building exercises for the same reason. Like when you talk about time, what I said before is at the core of every individual is, do I belong? And so time helps people feel like they belong, but also so does growth. And they, more than any other, this generation, and I'm talking about all the generations, because the research that we just did, we tested through generation and gender. So we have everything from older millennials, younger millennials, all the way up to Gen X and all the way down to that first generation, Gen Y, to see what are the drivers, what really makes people feel connected, what makes them feel happy at work, what makes them feel like they want to stay in organizations. And the two biggest factors that you can see when you read between the lines, time it's interesting that you say it that way. Belonging is the number one, but the key part of that is, can I grow here? Because more than any other, like gone are the days where people punched a clock and took a paycheck. That it's just what they should do. It's what they felt like they should do. And in the olden days, there was satisfaction in that, satisfaction in providing for your family and keeping a job for a long time. Now people are like, I want to grow. I want to develop. I want to become who I want to become. And so any organization that is committed to that will put in mentorship programs, will provide executive coaching, will find ways to help people grow and develop. And we'll sit down with someone and say, what are your career goals? And not be afraid of the answers.
That's a big key.
Because that's tricky. When somebody's like, I want to keep employees, I want to keep them happy, I want to stay in organizations. But then you ask questions like, what do you want to do in 5 years? And it doesn't involve the organization, that panics. But here's the thing, that question not only makes you interested and makes that employee feel like they matter and value, but it allows you to plan. And so instead of somebody just quitting overnight, or somebody saying, I want to work in London in 5 years, and you're like, oh no, that's a threat, then you can say, great, how can I help you get that? What experiences do you need at this organization that matter? And then you can put on your hat, in 3 years, I need to find a replacement. And so you're way more prepared in the future than be in silence while someone is silently working on their goals behind the scenes and then finally comes in and says, I want to give you my 2-week notice.
Yeah.
And people feel like at that level, they shouldn't be investing in those employees, but they always should. I can tell you time and time again where people chose to stay with organizations because they felt like their goals and their dreams mattered in that organization, and they felt heard, they felt seen, they felt like there were ways for them to grow and develop in the organization. And what they thought were their goals 5 years ago shifted.
Because we grow.
Totally.
We shoot
and
for different
changed.
things.
And so if you can be committed to individual employee growth, then you actually might find that they are way more engaged and way more sticky in the organization.
I found this was one of the tools that I used is I interviewed we had like 4 to 5 different levels of management, but I interviewed my direct reports. And I said, what do you want personally, professionally, health-wise? And I wrote them on sticky notes and I stuck them on my wall. I'm like, Cody wants to lose 30 pounds. That's cool. How can I support that? Max wants to be able to do this. And all these people want to be able to pay off their credit cards and take trips and go to Ireland and all of these things. And I got to tell you, when I watched, like I had a friend, Martha, who was there. When I watched her sticky note come off my wall because she got it, I felt so cool.
Yes.
You know, and not to be selfish or take any credit, but it made me feel like we were headed in the right direction for that period. We accomplished something together. And maybe I didn't have any direct involvement whatsoever, but for me, it was important that what my direct reports thought was important to me, that they knew was important to me. And I actually learned that from I think it was someone that was telling me about God of all things. They're like, what you feel like is important to you, it's important to God too. So you're allowed to pray about that, and not to put myself in the God position or anything like that. I believe we're, his sons and daughters, but I figured like that's a principle. That's a principle that I could duplicate and that I can copy not only as a leader in a company, but as a leader in a home. Like for my kids, what's important to you is important to me. And how can we do that even if I don't agree with it?
Yes.
Right?
I 100% agree. And if more bosses and managers understood that, they would have happier employees. And we talk about this, and I haven't said this yet, but the research also showed that 90% of working Americans agreed that if they were happier, they would be better in all the workplace situations that we tested. They would be more productive. They'd be more engaged. They'd be better team players. They'd be more creative, more innovative, better leaders. And so people talk about happiness being this, well, we can't. How do we help that? We're not going to be able to do that. And why should we? Because that's a soft skill. But this actually affects your ROI. And so if you think about what happiness means, and if you also look at the statistic where every generation except for Generation X, which was the oldest generation that we tested, we actually didn't test baby boomers. We wanted to go into 4 generations. And the baby boomer generation is preparing for retirement, and they're in a totally different stage than the others. So, but Generation X, which is the next generation right under that, they're the only generation that said that what mattered most from their leadership was stability, which doesn't surprise you given their age and their place in the working chain. But every other generation, the 3 generations lower, older millennials, younger millennials, and Gen Z, all said that the number one thing that they wanted from their boss was support. And they wanted interest outside of the office. Because to them, work isn't work. Work is part of their lifestyle. And work and their lifestyle are interconnected. So having a boss who cares if you lose 30 pounds or save money or do whatever else matters to them, because if you come into the office and the only thing you say is, hey, are you getting your job done today? Then they're like, this doesn't fit with me. Like
I committed that sin too.
I can't, right. And we all have all done it.
Yeah.
But the ones who are like, hey, how's your marathon training going? And like would connect with their employees, it doesn't take long. And that is the misconception, that it would take too long to be connected to your team. But really, it's a question like, hey, how was your marathon training this weekend? Were you pleased with what you did? It can be a simple conversation. And then if you have something else you want to talk about, you can. We also have to establish, you talk about expectations, which is really important. Establish that you will have questions about the office. Establish that you will have questions about your job performance and what you can do to make that happen. Because too often we worry that if we say it too much, they're going to tune out. Create a culture where you have conversations about performance regularly, and then they're not as big of a surprise.
Yeah, my favorite way to do that was I had a sheet that I filled. I was like, fill this out prior to our one-on-one, and you're going to conduct the one-on-one. Here are my questions, but I want you to give me the feedback. I want you to go through them. And that seemed to work really well. But I want to lean into this idea of back to time, ironically. There was a tug of war that we experienced in our workplace of that the time that we are investing in happiness is stealing from the time on the phones, right? And we can't be making money on the phones if we're shooting pool. And how do you manage people who, if left unchecked, they would just come to work, clock in, and shoot pool all freaking day? And then now we get into discipline as leadership. And they're like, okay, so you've been shooting pool for 3 days this week. You don't have any dials. Like, how do you balance? And as a mom, I experienced this too. Even when I was like 7 as a little aunt, of these kids, I would struggle so much. I'm like, what if they don't like me because I'm disciplining them? And then I lose that trust overall. And that was my biggest piece of tension. So what if they don't like me because I have to discipline them?
Okay. I am so glad you asked this question, because if we had had a conversation 7, 8, 10 years ago about what culture was, people would have said, we've got to put pool tables in the break room and cereal in the kitchens.
Yeah.
And we saw so many organizations, large and small, shift to some what I would call fun culture pieces. And they're great. And then we saw lots of organizations say, people are playing too much pool. They're playing too much foosball. We created pickleball competitions, and now all people want to do is go play pickleball. Like, right. And so and this is where I think the big shift is. I think we thought that happiness at work were the opportunities that we provided that weren't work at work.
Mm-hmm.
The reality is that if you want happy employees, it's not about what you do that's not work. It's about how they feel about the work that they do and how they feel about themselves to show up. So for every organization that has pool tables and foosball tables and kitchens, and you have more people who are playing than working, you need to establish a culture reset where you set rules or boundaries around whatever that looks like. In most organizations, they will say you can have a 15-minute in the morning, 15-minute in the afternoon. You can have an hour lunch break doing whatever you want. The 15-minute in the morning and the afternoon, we actually pay for that. So if you want to play foosball or basketball or play video games on your phone, we don't care. Take a break and give yourself an opportunity for your mind to shift. Set parameters around what you provide and when, and allow people the flexibility and autonomy within that. But be willing to say, hey, listen, it looks like it's a little bit more than what you're doing. And as long as the expectations are set, then you can have conversations to rein people back in. The challenge is they assumed that if it was unlimited, people would self-regulate.
Well, that's what I was going to say. I'm like, come on, we're all grown ups. I hate being your mom.
I know. But say that. To have that conversation that just says, don't make me be your mom here. You have a job that needs to be done and a work that needs to be done. What needs to happen is, whether you choose some of those culture pieces or not, make sure that your employees have an emotional intelligence that helps them self-regulate. And I think this is even more important now than it ever has been before. In the age of AI, we have to make EI center stage. Because in a world where you're trying to figure out what's real, what's not real, people's individual emotions will help them self-regulate and be able to discern fact from fiction, truth from error, and everything else in between. And so as you teach and train on emotional intelligence, make it a part of your team conversations, make it a part of your understanding, bring people in, have speakers who talk about it, teach. Our study also showed that people like to read books and listen to podcasts on happiness and emotional wellness. So you could create a book club on it, however that works within your organization. Allow them to be the center of the learning. You don't have to be the one to do all the learning, but if it's part of the culture, they will actually be better about regulating their time, because what we're finding is in the era of quiet quitting, where we don't talk about it the same way that we did a couple of years ago. If they don't understand their own emotional wellness, they will spend more time away from work, playing pool, playing foosball, playing everything else.
At the workplace.
Chatting in the kitchen, because they are so dysregulated emotionally that sitting down at the desk is hard.
Yeah, it felt like prison.
Yes.
You know, even though that's your job and that's what makes you money and that's what feeds your family.
Correct.
The action was so far disconnected from the why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm. And so if they're emotionally well, it's a lot easier to sit at the desk.
Yeah.
And so it doesn't mean that they're going to not want to play pool, or that they'll get caught up in a game. It'll last longer than the 15 minutes. But if you have emotionally well employees, they are better able to self-regulate.
How do you teach leaders to fix this?
So a couple things. If you don't have the expertise within your organization, get it, and don't be afraid to invest in it. So
and hire without. You're saying bringing consultants.
Correct.
Which I think is so smart. We always miss our blind spots by definition. Even as the body of an organization, a body with a ton of people in it can't see its own blind spots because we are so used to the patterns of our own behavior.
Yes.
Oh,
so
man.
Bring in the expertise. The second thing that I mention that I think is important for every level or the organization is to have common language. So that's where the education comes from, and make it part of your organization, whether that's quotes that you put on cubicle walls or conversations that you have in team meetings. Let people know that this is a language from the top to the bottom and everywhere in between. Because if you are starting to have more conversations on happiness, on emotions, allow it to be something that can be discussed, and not like people are becoming therapists and sharing all of their, but just that, hey, what do you need to be happier today? How can we help you? What does that look like? Or even just some sort of framework that they can look at regularly to help them choose back in. And the other piece that I would say is I think that you have to revisit leadership training, because leaders are the ones who are on the front lines dealing with every level of the organization. And so have additional training specifically for leaders for them to understand emotional wellness so that they can champion it within their own teams and they can work on themselves. Too often, once we start having these conversations, leaders are looking at it like my team needs to do this rather than I need to do this too.
Right.
And
so,
the
team is screaming, no, you need to do this.
No, you need to do this.
Yeah.
You need to do this. In fact, that was one of my favorite, and I think we kind of mentioned it, that employees would be happier at work if their bosses or managers were happier.
Yeah.
And so if you can just see how important your own emotional intelligence is. And so if you're talking about it from an outside in approach, and I think that actually is better. Some people have it within their organizations. Like I love all the organizations that will get their people certified in John Maxwell or Crucial Conversations or something like that. So if you have that kind of training, make it internal. However, we're also seeing the external training actually is valued more because it's not just their peer or boss or someone they're always looking at. It's someone that the company has said, hey, this is a resource. This is expertise that we need. We value it. They almost put their stamp of approval on it, rather than them saying, well, of course you think Tony is the best person to talk about this. You pay him a paycheck, And so there's sometimes if there's respect in the organization, they might love Tony. In other cases, they might say, I really need to find someone else that we can say, we endorse this. We think it's important. You should listen. And so that education from top down and the continued conversation, the one and done approach doesn't work. For
you can't shower once and then be clean the rest of your life.
So it's the training and it's the regular language and it's making sure that ongoing leadership are continuing the effort.
I like what you said about bringing in an outside party, because I imagine the leaders within the company, everyone that holds title, now they're in the student seat right next to everybody else. Mm-hmm. We're all learning this together. We're all learning this framework together. We're all learning, like, we're students. We're equals here. Mm-hmm. That it's missing because in a lot of organizations, because I get my ego from my title and I get my satisfaction from being better than you and all of these other terrible ideas, which makes them need the training even more. But do you have a framework that you bring to the table and common language that you use for companies?
I do have a training on emotional intelligence in the workplace that we give, and it's split into 2 levels. One is all hands and one is leaders only. And we even have leadership facilitation conversations that we have just with the C-suite. So for people who come in, I say that and I'm like, I think I'm just selling my own stuff. But honestly, there are some times where an organization will bring me in and I will say, I'm not the right fit for you, but you need this person.
When does that happen? How do you know that?
So I can tell I have to have a connection with the CEO.
Yeah.
And if there isn't, I have had 2 instances even in the last 12 months where in conversations, because you usually when I'm brought into an organization, it's because somebody has seen a podcast episode or they watched a video online and they send it to their boss who then sends it to someone else.
But I love that it's going up to the boss and like, hey, you should
watch
check this out.
Yep. But I won't move forward until I've had a conversation with the CEO, even if the CEO is not going to be involved. So someone might bring me in just to talk to their sales team, which is fine. But I really love to have that as just like, I just would love 15 minutes with your CEO because I can get a handle on pulse on whether or not they support the training, common language, what their ultimate goals are. And it works so much better. But if I'm with a CEO and they're like, this is dumb, so-and-so's bringing you in, I don't care that it's happening.
It's going to erode everything you're going to do.
There are still some things I can do, even if a CEO isn't involved. But at some level, if I can see what the CEO needs, I can say, oh, you need this person or, oh, you need this training that might be a better fit for the organization. And if there's clashing, that's okay. Like chemistry works for different reasons. I'm just clear that I will only work with the organizations that I know I can help. And that makes it a lot easier for me to show up in authenticity, but also for them to receive because it's in alignment.
So what are your frameworks? I want some of the common language and some of the frameworks. Because I've explored a lot, but I'm curious as to yours. Like, do you have like a safe word for conversations? Like, this conversation is getting out of control. We have to interrupt this thing. Like, what is your framework like?
Sure. There are two that I typically teach. The first is around stretch capacity, which is really designed for leaders, but then I want to teach it to the entire organization. So I teach it to leaders first. Stretch capacity is the idea that every person within your organization has a limited stretch capacity based off of their own current experiences. And
That sounds like workload to me.
sure. However, what I would say is there's a difference between stretch capacity and someone's ability to be able to manage the job that they were hired to do. I am always going to support leaders in ensuring that the job that needs to be done, that was hired, that was expressed, is still getting done. That said, if you have 12 different employees and you have someone who's caring for an aging parent that's on their deathbed, and someone who is just about to have a baby, and someone else who, like, all these different challenges that are happening from micro stressors to macro stressors, you adjust and say, okay, what is the stretch capacity of this person? What I know is that when we stretch, we grow. And yet, when we're dealing with employee burnout and challenge and everything else, the inclination is to give people a break, like make them totally rest or take some time off, which can be good. However, what we're finding is, yes, take time off. Yes, get a breather. Yes, do something else. But where can you still stretch? What can you still do? Even if it's on a small scale, like a tiny rubber band can only do a little for like a little girl's hair.
The braces,
Or the brace rubber bands, that can only stretch a little. And there's other rubber bands that can stretch a ton. And so it's knowing the different stages of individuals and being able to say, this is what you can do that I know you can stretch, and this is what you can do that I know you can stretch. One of the best leadership examples I received was when I was in my mid-20s, and there were 12 of us on a team. We had co-leaders, which was interesting environment, but I really liked that.
This is like The Office. I'm the co-manager.
Yeah, they were co-leaders. And so they did one-on-ones with us, and they brought me in and on my one-on-ones, and we had some conversations. They told me on the things to work on. And then one of my teammates a week or two later after hers, she was saying, oh yeah, they told me I needed to watch this video. I needed to do that. It's totally different than what they asked me to do. And at first I was surprised. It wasn't better, worse, harder, anything. At first I was surprised, like, don't they care about everyone being the same? But I learned watching them that they were keenly aware of every single individual and what they could and couldn't do. And so when you're talking about stretch capacity, it's as you as a leader understanding where can someone stretch, where can they not? And in stretch capacity, we teach a framework of the rest and recovery, optimal performance, and then burnout. And the key factors in pre-burnout and watching for burnout in your team so that you can hopefully avoid the burnout that swings the pendulum all the way back, leading to rest and recovery. But what I love about the stretch capacity conversation as a leader is it helps you think about each of your team members, knowing their individual challenges. One team member, even outside of external challenges, you might say, okay, this team is working on these 4 people are working on a big project. They're super stressed right now. I can't ask more of them. These people over here are not working on the same project. I can ask more of them in this space. But what I love about the stretch capacity conversation when we're doing it for all hands or all employees is people starting to understand their own breaking points that they haven't been able to before.
People are starving for this.
Because in their mind, they were just told to keep working, like keep working, keep working, keep working, keep hustling. Hustling is great. Like you want the next promotion, you want the job raise, you want all these other things. And so we're taught to race truly. And so if you can help someone understand, hey, your stretch capacity right now actually might be small. Let's work within that before you get to burnout. And it gives people, like, I have people come up to me and say, I didn't know that my capacity was slow, or I gave up and I've stopped working because I was in burnout and there are things I can do. And so it gives people the opportunity to say, it's okay if you're not in a place to stretch, and to acknowledge that you aren't. The challenge is that more than ever, what we're noticing is that people's resilience reserves are low. The last 5 years has been really trying.
Taxed all of us.
For everyone. And so the challenge is that you've got team members with really tiny stretch capacity. Like the entire team might have a really small stretch capacity. So we still, but still, for every leader, for every individual, our conversations are around what can you do? and creating daily, weekly, and monthly tasks around what they can do that help them to continue to grow, instead of allowing people to burn out and then go straight to break, which is fine. Give them the breaks in between, but pre-burnout, if you can manage those pieces and help them get there. So that's one framework. We also teach a framework around being the happiest, IST, and how to switch and change your emotions. So it depends for each organization.
You mean like the proliferator of happy?
Yes.
I like
so
that.
Like we talk about being the happiest, like the optimist isn't enough. How do you be the happiest?
Yeah.
And the IST is like identify the feelings that you're feeling, strategize on how to switch. And then T is to take action. What are the actions that you need to take to switch your emotions now? And what actions do you take regularly to fill the emotions that you want to feel?
And I feel when I hear that we're back to communication and expectations with that. Yeah. And for me to communicate with the people I work with, even in a relationship with my husband and me, we're basically running this business all in our onesie, but to communicate that with each other and be like, here's I'm going to use that now, stretch capacity. Here's what I can do today. And when I was in leadership, I remember asking people that question, and I would make the mistake of framing it poorly, where I would say, here's what I need today. Can you do that? And then they would, of course, say yes, because everyone says yes to the boss. Otherwise, they're going to lose their job. Right. And then they failed to do it because they knew they couldn't do it to begin with. And now here we are back at one. And now my integrity's lost. And because there's trust that's broken because you said you could, but you didn't. That was one of the hardest things to deal with when I would impose, can you do this instead of what can you do? And then there's the other conversation of, we hired you for this. You said yes to the expectation, and now you're falling short, and you're telling me your stretch capacity is half of what you said you could before. So I don't know if it's going to work. How do you see this working? And I steal from, who was the FBI negotiator? Chris Voss. I steal stuff from his book all the time. Have you read this one, Never Split the Difference? You would love it. So I always ask questions, well, how am I supposed to blank, because now I need you to give me the solution. I find that works way easier.
I love that principle. And I think that too often what happens when we talk about expectations, and especially when we're dealing with burnout, is we have people who have shown us signs for a long time that their capacity has shifted and we've ignored it. Or we have given them the benefit of the doubt so long that we've just said, oh, that'll be better tomorrow, or it'll be better next week, or it'll be better a month from now, or it'll be better on January 7th, or whatever. Like we've kicked the can so far down the street that we don't even expect it from them anymore, because that's safer. And what we're trying to do is to help leaders have conversations at the outset, the very beginning, that says, hey, listen, I get that you were just hit with this challenge. What can we do to maintain both what you need and what the organization needs, and set those kinds of expectations? And if it's like, I can't do this, and you talk about taking time off right away, or disability, or shifting to part-time, or whatever that looks like. And that doesn't mean that you don't give people time, but I think that what happens is the conversations about expectations don't come until 2 or 3 weeks, months, days in. And then people are like, well, you've been fine. Why are you bothered now? Like, you've been fine for the last 6 weeks of me doing this. Why are you bothered now? Because it established for them that they could continue to work 7 hours a week and get a full-time paycheck. And so have conversations earlier, and it makes it so much easier to have the conversations later.
I think that comes in that setting out expectations right at the beginning. Like, here's what we're going to do if expectations are not met. So when that does happen, we know what the next step is. It's a one-on-one, or it's an improvement plan, or whatever the case may be. I struggled before. One of my biggest struggles was this: they tell me one thing and then do another. And then I'm back in this cycle of, now I have to be a disciplinarian, and can't you manage yourselves? We're all adults here. It would make me tear my hair out to no end because of this cycle. And I had to look back at myself, because I was the root cause. It was happening to me with more than one person. And I find that, I keep coming back to this because it's so representative of what happens at work, and it's so representative of what happens in a relationship, and it happens as a parent. All of these things, you are testing me and it feels like you're doing it on purpose. What the hell? Like, what do we do? What are we meant to do in this situation?
It's
on me.
Well, but still, one of the recommendations that one of the things that we recommend is that you hire and fire based off of your company values. And so one of the implementations that we encourage people to put in place is, when you are hiring, some people will call it a mission statement. I actually think you need a value statement that is separate from your mission statement. And for our organization, it just says, and I should have it memorized because if I'm going to say it on the air, I should know what it is. But it's like, we commit to working with each other and with our clients through the following values. And they are things like honesty, commitment to hard work, keeping promises, simple things like that, that when the very beginning, I pass this across the table and I say, hey, this is how I live and breathe in this organization. Which one of these is the easiest for you and which one's the hardest?
Oh, that's a great question.
And then they almost every single time they will say, oh, those are all easier for me. I think those are important. Yeah, you're in an interview and it's great. But then when a challenge comes, we will talk about that regularly. It is posted in our office. It is passed across the table. And so there are some times where I'm like, hey, I feel like we're out of integrity on this issue. How can we get back on? And then they know that I'm saying commitment to the value. They know that I'm going to hold accountability for the value. And I have had people come back to me and say, I really like this, but this isn't the right place for me. Like, they honor
That's so
that
relieving.
they are, again, self-selecting out because they recognize that the standard, and some people have said to me, your standards are too high, but I have 5 values and I don't feel like my standards are too high.
You're like, thank you.
And in the end, it's like, that's fine. You know what? I hope you find a place that matches your value and commitment, because I want to work with people who are so happy and excited to work. And my interview process takes a long time. It takes like 3 months for me to feel comfortable hiring someone. And so I will hire them for a short term. They will come in for working interviews. There's all kinds of pieces. But then at the end of the day, like, I will also let go based off of the values in the organization. And so it's tricky if you are midway, you're like, okay, well, I can't hire. These people are already hired. Create a value statement, pass it across the table, have a conversation with your team. And you can have a value statement as a team, but make sure you have upper level buy-in so that they're supporting you on what that looks like. If you or work with other leaders to create it for the organization, set the standard, have the conversations, do the training on the values, let them know that it's important, let them know that you will hire and fire based off of these values, that you'll have conversations on team meetings about them, that when there are when we've hit a wall on them, that you're going to have a conversation what the value is. One of the things I recommend is that your values can't just be trust, communication,
The ChatGPT
integrity.
answers.
I mean, one of the ones that I have is that we think the best of each other and that we have fun, that we infuse fun into all that we do. And so there are some times where I will say, we are not having enough fun, or you are not having enough fun. Like, take a deep breath. We need to have some fun, because I need to see
It's like disciplinary fun.
that I am equally committed to that goal as I am integrity, or as I am in whatever else that we're responsible. Like, committed to doing our best work is one of my important pieces. And so sometimes we can have conversations where I have said to my team, what is happening? And they're like, this isn't your best work. And I love it when they come back to me and honor me and my values, because then it shows that they care about it too.
That's pretty
And
awesome.
they can push back and go, this isn't your best. And I love that. I love when they're challenging me back, because we've created safe and healthy environments where they feel like they can. But I think that when you start to have that's why we talk about how having the training doesn't just work. Having common language changes everything. And so when there is a common language, it's so much easier to support and keep people accountable.
It's such a humbling feeling to have that. This isn't your best work. I'm going to steal that one. Can we just use that one, babe, as a foundation for us? It's like, this isn't your best work. I mean, they love you, but try again.
Yeah, and it's okay, because I remember in 8th grade once, my teacher, everyone was given a project and they could choose one of 6 projects to do, right, for this big term project.
Sure.
And then he took 10 of us that were probably one of that got the best grades in the class. Like, hey, next term, I'm actually thinking of offering these options. Would you be willing to try them and see if it worked? And in the end, it was hard. Like, he wanted me to create a newspaper back in the day where we didn't have Canva, okay? It was really hard. And I created it, and I had to write some articles, and I turned it into him, and he said, Michelle, you can do better than this.
See, and that's such a motivating thing for me to hear.
And he was right.
Yeah.
I phoned it in on the last night. And while I felt embarrassment for a half a second, and then after that, I felt seen.
That's the whole thing I'm focusing on, is like, he recognizes how amazing you are, and he knows enough about you to say, you know, this isn't your best, but look how capable you are. I want to see
Yes.
that.
And he set that up the right way, because he was like, hey, I'm taking my best students. I'm going to ask them to do some of these things. I wanted to be one of his best students. And then when I wasn't, and it wasn't even about him being disappointed. It was acknowledging that I was disappointed in me and what I was capable of doing. And it acknowledged that my stretch capacity on that particular project, I gave this much
You hadn't
when I
yet met
could
it.
have given this. And so it's not like I'm trying, I truly believe we cannot run faster than we have strength. And there are times when we can't do it. But even if in our own organizations, the only thing that we ask is this your best work? And we are helping people with what their best work is.
Yeah.
It helps them know you are capable of more than this. I see it in you. And I hate the word potential. Like, the word potential is one of my least favorite
Kind of
words.
lost
It
its
feels
ring to
icky.
me.
Every
Yeah.
single teacher said Michelle has more potential. If she'd just be quiet, she would be able
And now
to
she's a
measure up to
speaker.
more, right? But when you're talking about doing your best work, potential is probably the word for that. But there is something that says, I see you. You can do this. I want this from you. You want this from you. And I don't want to disappoint. And so when you talk about values, figuring out what those values are and letting people say doing your best work and whatever your organization wants to put in for your own languaging. But that's why common language is important. And that's why understanding that at our core, people want to belong into the organization, but they also really desperately want to grow. No one wants to stay stagnant. Even if they say, I'm just punching a clock and taking a paycheck, they're doing that because they think that it will give them some other place of growth, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to punch a clock here because I'm working on my side business over here.
Yeah.
Everyone will find a way to grow and develop. And so how do you as an organization foster that?
So I think every tool that you've given all boils down to, can you be honest with yourself, and can you be honest with the person across the desk, whether it's a subordinate or a higher up? What do you think is the best way to develop that honesty, and what erodes it? What makes someone not want to be honest with you beyond being threatened with your job?
Honestly, no pun intended. I think integrity is one of the biggest challenges in the workplace. I think as not just organizations, but as societies, somewhere we became okay with people not telling the truth. And we say we're not. We say we're not. We say that honesty and integrity are important. And yet we allow it in lots of ways, whether that's in the media we consume, in social media, watching people only share their highlight reel instead of sharing their real life. But there are so many places where we have allowed dishonesty. And so I don't know how we're going to culturally overcome that. What I do know is that one of the biggest challenges in the workplace is somebody saying one thing and doing another.
Mm-hmm.
And somebody saying, oh, yes, I can do that, and then not doing it.
Exactly.
And the challenge is that when you call people on it, they'll say, because we also have to couple honesty and integrity with pride, and they will double down and say, are you calling me a liar?
Oh, they'll throw it right back at you and
They will
ignore
throw
the
it right back.
question entirely.
And so the only way I can see organizations shifting and really valuing this is making sure that at every level of the organization, when you need to, you apologize. You have to be willing to say, we tried this, it didn't work, I'm sorry. Like, those words, I'm sorry, are the fastest way to get people back to honesty, because you've made it safe for them to say it. And we don't. Leaders don't. Leaders don't say, I'm sorry.
Because it's a threat.
CEOs don't say, I'm sorry.
It's a threat.
But until we can change the word culture in every organization to include humility that says, I'm sorry when I've done something wrong, you can't expect your team to do it, because they don't feel safe. They don't feel safe saying, I'm sorry. They don't feel safe saying anything else except for defending, doubling down, staying in pride, and saying, are you calling me a liar? Because that makes them feel threatened. But if they feel safe, then you can create a culture of honesty and that has to be something that we are all working on, because you have somebody who says, I will be on time tomorrow, and then they're not on time. That is a symptom to me also of dishonesty and accountability, just erosion of that and what that looks like. It's from everything from what people say they're going to do and don't do, from the ways that people don't say, I'm sorry, I can't do that right now. Honoring their stretch capacity, but just say yes and do it because they feel like that's their only job. But then also when there's something wrong, owning up to taking responsibility, being a problem solver, and ownership. It's tricky.
My favorite book around that is Extreme Ownership. Have you read this one by Jocko? Oh my goodness. I probably took the pendulum and swung it and took accountability for so many things. You know, Richard will tell you that you say sorry so much. I'm like, well, I'm trying to own it.
It's easier.
But you're right to that. And I think that it really comes from trust, which has this two-sided coin of, if I don't ever hear the truth from you, then I can't trust you. But if I can trust you, I can own the truth. But I can only develop that through being honest and willing to take whatever happens when I'm saying, yeah, that was my bad.
Yeah.
I think that's a principle for parenting. It's a principle that I'm going through with my daughter right now, with her friends, and learning how to own your stuff. And it's a principle for the world. I think it's what I'm learning from you most is that workplace conversations are just a bubbling to the surface of conversations that we have in every aspect of our life, with our spouse, with our kids, with our parents, with our family. It's just, it's concentrated in the workplace because we have these metrics that are the result of these behaviors, right? So, okay, so you brought something for everyone here. I want you to tell us about what that is and where they can get it.
So I have been speaking on resilience and emotional intelligence in the workplace for almost a little more than a decade now. But last year I commissioned some research with an organization out of Texas. And I'm really proud of the research that we did.
This is the research you've been kind of dipping into.
And we've talked a little bit about that. We've shared some of the statistics here on the show. But if you want to see more, the first one is out just on happiness in general. The second one on leadership is out this month. So it's coming out soon. So if you go to speakmichelle.com/research, you can get all of the information that we have, including some videos on how to be happier yourself. And then there also will be that for leadership and happiness in the workplace.
That is awesome. And we'll make sure we get that and put that in the show notes so everybody can find
Perfect.
it.
Thanks.
Where can people hang out with you online or maybe live events that you're putting on?
Yeah, I spend the most time on Instagram and LinkedIn. So you can find me, Michelle McCullough, on LinkedIn, and I'm at Speak Michelle on Instagram.
Okay, we'll put those in the show notes too. And for those of you watching on Instagram, make sure you give her a follow because she's incredible. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to be in your world for quite some time, and I'm just glad that we were able to reconnect here on the show.
This is great. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for coming on. Friends, this is this episode of the Marianne Hickman Show. First and foremost, before you leave, I do want you to go check out Michelle's stuff. It's in the show notes if you're watching the recording of this. If you're watching live, it'll be on our YouTube channel, I think Sunday, right? This is the episode that goes out Sunday. Awesome. But listen, I want you to remember how important you are, how loved you are, and how much your voice matters. We will see you in the next episode. Hey, what's up? Marianne Hickman here. Hey, listen, I hope you enjoyed that episode. We have some pretty amazing speakers on my podcast, and of course, more to come. If this is something that you enjoyed, guys, smash the like button, smash the subscribe button. You guys know what to do. I love your comments, and I respond to every single one of them personally, not a bot or an agency. So if this is something you're enjoying, tell me about it. Tell me your gold nuggets. I want to hear from you. But here's the most important thing I want you to laser in on. I told you about the podcast database. You've probably seen me post about it all over social media. I want to make sure that you get it. So here's what I want you to do. Go to mariannehickman.com/database. Once you put all of your information in there, I'm going to send you the document. You request access to it. Boom, it's unlocked. Once you're in there, my rule of thumb is to apply to 10 podcasts a month. It's very digestible. It's very easy to do. And the database gets updated twice a week. So I want you constantly checking back in there for the next podcast that fits your audience. Thank you for being here. Much love to you, and we'll see you in the next episode.